You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. I've got to start by breaking down Buccaneers Patriots. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that game last night is one of the most important games in NFL history. Forget the fact that Brady now has the most passing yards in NFL history. Forget the fact that Brady has now beaten every single NFL team. As if we needed any more proof that Brady isn't a system quarterback, was never a system quarterback. You got it yesterday. Not for nothing, but if Brady was a system quarterback, the architect of the system would know how to shut him down. No. They couldn't shut Brady down. Now, Brady wasn't great. He didn't throw a touchdown pass. But Brady did complete 22 of his 43 passes for 269 yards. He led the drive down the field in the final 4.5 minutes that ultimately gave the Buccaneers the win. I mean, I'll say this. It was great to see the warm reception that Brady got. He was cheered in warm-ups. I'm sure there were at least a few Patriots fans that wanted Brady to play well. Maybe you didn't want the Buccaneers to win, that's okay, but Brady could have played well. I don't think anyone would have minded that. He talked to Robert Kraft before the game. He had a big conversation with Bill Belichick after the game. I mean, the Patriots really pulled out all the stops for Brady. They put up the graphic on the Jumbotron when Brady broke Breeze's record. They gave his family a suite. I don't think I've ever seen that before. The home team giving the road team's starting quarterback's family a suite. I mean, this was it. This was what we wanted to see all those years that Brady and Belichick were together with the Patriots. Who would win if they went up against each other? Who's more responsible for the Patriots' success? Brady or Belichick? More people said Belichick than Brady. I always said it was a symbiotic relationship. One wouldn't be as successful without the other. I don't know how true that is. I mean, Brady has excelled since leaving the Patriots. Obviously, he won the Super Bowl last year. He won his 7th ring, more than any team in NFL history. And the Buccaneers are off to a great start this year. They're 3-1. You take a look at the Patriots. They didn't even sniff the playoffs last year, and they're 1-3. You know, we talk about the Patriots as being the class of the NFL. Not for nothing, but they have the same record as the Dolphins and Jets. I mean, we'll never know if Brady would have won all those Super Bowls that he won with Belichick without Belichick. But instead of the statement being that Tom Brady was just a system quarterback, I think the question needs to be, how great did Brady make Belichick look? I mean, I don't want to kill Bill Belichick. He's the greatest coach in NFL history, but there is something to be said about how much the Patriots have fallen off since Brady left. I mean, people used to bring up the 2008 Patriots as evidence of the fact that Brady was just a system quarterback. Yes, the Patriots went 11-5 that year, but they did miss the playoffs. That does mean something. I mean, if the Patriots were really a system team, they would have made the playoffs in 2008. You know, Brady has said in the past that he didn't think that the Patriots would have been as successful without him, and Belichick kind of echoed that sentiment. They're right. They're 100% right. I mean, Brady will never admit this, but that was an important win to him. How could it not be? How could he not want to go back to Foxborough and beat his old team? How could he not want to stick it to Belichick a little bit? How could he not want to stick it to Kraft a little bit? You know that those guys respect each other. But come on, there was more to that game than just a win or a loss. If Brady had gone out there last night and looked lost, we would have said this is another case of Belichick taking advantage of someone that he used to know. Whether it's a former player, a former assistant coach, he knows how to exploit their weaknesses. And Belichick tried to do that last night. He tried to disguise coverages. He tried to disguise pressure. That's really the only thing that Belichick could do. Brady knows all his plays. He knows what the Patriots are going to do defensively. He watched Belichick's defense for about 20 years. You can't beat him straight up. How would you beat him? By confusing him. And it worked a little bit, because Brady wasn't great. But he did enough to win. That's the most important thing. Did Brady overthrow some receivers? Yes. Was it the cleanest game I've ever seen from him? Absolutely not. But he came through when it mattered most. How many times have we seen that movie? Brady's down late, or he's tied late. He's got to drive down the field to give his team the lead. You had to know that the Buccaneers were going to take the lead on that drive that started with 4.5 minutes left. It was kind of nice seeing Brady do those things to the Patriots that he did as a Patriot all those years. I mean, my buddy Nick, not the Nick that you know, another Nick, he made a very good point. People never hated Tom Brady. They just hated the Patriots. You know what? He's right. Now that Brady's a Buccaneer, let me ask you something. Do you find yourself rooting against him? Maybe you found yourself rooting against him when he was a Patriot because, let's be honest, they won every year. They were in the playoffs every year. But for the Buccaneers, a team that in their history has not been successful, a team that before Brady got there hadn't made the playoffs since 2007, that went through quarterbacks like Josh Freeman, Mike Glennon, and Jameis Winston, it's easy to get behind them. It's easy to get behind Brady. I mean, people still root against the Patriots because they hate cheaters, and Belichick has that reputation of playing fast and loose with the rules, whether it's Spygate, Deflategate, the thing with the Bengals a few years ago. Belichick's not the easiest guy to root for. So people will always hate the Patriots. I'd be curious, though, when after Belichick retires, how the Patriots are perceived. I think it depends. I think if they go with Belichick disciples, a guy like Josh McDaniels, Matt Patricia, or Steve Belichick, people will still hate the Patriots. But if they say, you know what, we want to go in a completely different direction, this is a new era, and we're going to make a hard right turn, I feel like people will say, okay, the Patriots are just another one of those teams where if they win, great. If they lose, great. I don't care. As long as it doesn't impact my team. I mean, I'm a Jets fan, so I care. But to a Giants fan, or a 49ers fan, or a Cardinals fan, or a Bears fan, the Patriots would just be another one of those teams. And speaking of Belichick's retirement, and I know I haven't spoken a lot about the game, but this game is important in a broader context. We need to really think about when Belichick is going to call it quits. It's impossible to get into his mind. Many people have tried and many people have failed. I mean, Brady said something yesterday that is really important. No one has ever gotten it right in terms of how I really feel about Belichick and the Patriots. All this speculation about whether he would stay or whether he would leave. All the talk about how it meant for him to win a Super Bowl without Belichick. It's fun to speculate, there's no question. But there are certain people who you just can't get in the head of no matter how hard you try. Belichick is one of those guys, but I'm going to try to do it anyway. When is he going to call it quits? When will he realize that he has nothing left to gain by staying with the Patriots? If anything, him staying around is hurting his legacy. If Belichick had retired right after Brady signed with the Buccaneers, it would have helped Belichick, because the Patriots not making the playoffs last year wouldn't have been a negative reflection on Belichick. And Nick Caserio could have been the Patriots GM. Josh McDaniels could have been the head coach. They could have kept the Belichick way, but Belichick would have retired, and he wouldn't have gotten beaten by Brady last night. And the Patriots not making the playoffs last year while Brady wins another Super Bowl wouldn't have looked as bad. Again, look at the record. The Patriots are 1-3. They've started this season 1-3. They never did that with Brady as the starting quarterback. If you want to be very technical, they did it in 2001. Brady's first year as a starting quarterback. Their first Super Bowl year. But remember, Drew Bledsoe started those first 2 games. You can't put the 1-3 start on Brady. Brady's first 4 games as a starter, the Patriots went 3-1. That year, as the starter, the Patriots went 10-3. And obviously beat the Raiders in the Tuck Rule game, beat the Steelers in the AFC title game, and beat the Rams on the iconic Adam Vinatieri field goal. The Patriots are in uncharted waters right now. With Brady, they never started 1-3. That looks bad for Belichick. Do we really think the Patriots are going to turn this season around and make the playoffs? Let me ask you something. Would it really surprise you if the Patriots finished last in the AFC East? Like, what if that game yesterday from Zach Wilson is a sign of things to come? And what if Tua comes back and puts it all together? I'm not a Mac Jones fan. People are hyping him up. 19 straight completions. Hallelujah. The Patriots found their franchise quarterback? No! Those are check down passes! Come on, any idiot can throw a check down pass. You know Jones is averaging 6.3 yards per attempt? That is terrible. The only quarterbacks that are worse than him in that stat are Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, Trevor Lawrence, Davis Mills, and Jacoby Brissett. All those teams, with the exception of the Jaguars, are 1-3. The Jaguars aren't 1-3. They're 0-4. Congratulations for not being 1-3. 4 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Yeah, a 70% completion percentage. Great. That's great. It really is. But on 6.3 yards per pass, that completion percentage better be high. If you can't complete a 6-yard pass, what good are you? The Patriots' future right now looks bleak. Look, I understand that in years past, we've said that about the Patriots, and they made us look foolish. But it's very hard to start a season 1-3 and then make the playoffs. It's been done in the past. The Washington football team did it. The Colts and Texans did it in 2018. The Dolphins and Lions did it in 2016. It's been done in the past, but out of the 479 teams in pro football history to start a season 1-3, only 42 have made the playoffs. That's 8.8%. The Patriots are done. The big bad wolf is dead. The dynasty is dead. And Belichick is going to need to think to himself, does he want another losing record on his ledger? Or does he want to hang it up and start the clock on his inevitable induction into Canton? If I was Belichick, I'd retire after the year. I'd let everyone know this is my last year. I think one thing that's important to Belichick is leaving the Patriots in a good position when he retires. Because I think he has a good relationship with Robert Kraft. The two of them go way back. That relationship is part of the reason why Belichick resigned as HC of the NYJ on a napkin. I don't think Belichick wants to see Kraft's team struggle. But now that he has a quarterback that he can look to as the future franchise guy, now that he has a coaching staff that is full of people who he trusts, Josh McDaniels, Matt Patricia, Steve Belichick, Gerard Mayo, people like that, I think he thinks that the Patriots are set up well for the future. So just retire, just hang it up, you have nothing left to prove. Another losing season on your ledger doesn't help you. Just retire. You have nothing left to prove. It's done. It's over. Your reign of terror is done. I mean, not for nothing, but Belichick made a really bad decision in that game yesterday. And I'm surprised no one's talking about it. It's 4th and 3 on the Buccaneers' 37. You've got a minute left in the game. You're down 2. You send Nick Folk out to attempt a 56-yard field goal. That would match his career high. Why on this earth did you send Folk out? It's 4th and 3. That sets up perfectly for Jones. Even Mac Jones can complete a 4-yard pass. I just proved that he can. Of course the 56-yarder is gonna doink off the post. Folk hasn't hit a 56-yard field goal since 2010 when he was with the Jets. He doesn't have that leg anymore. I'm not saying Folk is a bad kicker, he's not, but you can't send him out there for a 56-yard field goal when it's 4th and 3. Trust your quarterback. Wouldn't you rather throw like a simple slant or an out route or something to get you at least 4 yards? Rather than try a 56-yard field goal? We're not talking about a chip shot. We're talking about a kick that, even if it was on target, would have barely made it over the crossbar. That was a terrible decision by Belichick. I see that kick hit off the left upright, and I just think to myself, that was predictable. You had to know that that wasn't going to work. I don't think anyone in that building had a good feeling about the decision to kick a field goal except Bill Belichick. I mean, it was a terrible decision to kick the field goal. The Patriots have no running game whatsoever. They finished the game with -1 rushing yards. That's something out of Madden when you're playing on rookie mode. You know, the reality is Belichick isn't above criticism. At least not anymore. The lack of a run game, the decision to kick that field goal, Mac Jones not looking great. I mean, not for nothing, but the only win that the Patriots have is a victory over the Jets. Come on, how much can I read into that? It was a great performance by the Patriots. But again, how much can I read into it? Bill Belichick should retire at the end of this year. It's just that simple. If not for Brady v. Belichick, this game would have been the story of Week 4. And that is the Cardinals destroying the Rams. Kyler Murray picked apart the Rams secondary. Chase Edmonds ran roughshod over the Rams front seven. Everything that the Cardinals did worked. I mean, I'm not a Cliff Kingsbury fan. I think he makes a lot of really questionable in-game decisions, but I'll give him credit for what happened yesterday. The Cardinals putting up 465 total yards of offense, including 216 rushing yards, forcing 2 Rams turnovers. That was an excellent performance by the Cardinals. I mean, one thing that the Cardinals are doing really well this year is taking care of the football. They have a +5 turnover margin. Just think about the game yesterday. When Stafford throws the interception, the Cardinals march 87 yards down the field in just over 3 minutes to score a touchdown. The Sonny Michel fumble. 5 plays later, the Cardinals score a touchdown. One of the worst things that you can do as a football team is to not seize upon turnovers. If you force a turnover, you better capitalize on it. I don't care if you end up starting the ball at your 1-yard line. That is, in essence, a free possession. So you better capitalize on it. The Cardinals did. They scored 14 points off Rams' mistakes. I mean, don't look now, but the Cardinals are 4-0. Kyler Murray is an MVP candidate. The last two undefeated teams in the NFL are the Cardinals and Raiders. The Chiefs, with Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback, are in last place in the AFC West. Ben Roethlisberger has fallen off a cliff. The Jets and Giants both won yesterday in overtime. The first time that's ever happened. The Jets and Giants winning on the same day in overtime. Welcome to the Twilight Zone. Moving on now to Seahawks Niners. The big story there is that Trey Lance got his first extended taste of the NFL. Jimmy Garoppolo missed the entire second half with a calf injury. He'll be out for a couple weeks. So the pride of North Dakota State University, the third overall pick in this year's draft, came in and didn't look terrible. Didn't look great, but really didn't look terrible. Lance went 9 for 18 for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had 7 carries for 41 yards. I'll restate that. Lance had 9 completions for 157 yards. To put that into perspective, Jimmy Garoppolo had 14 completions for 165 yards. And not for nothing, but Garoppolo gets hurt again. I mean, for goodness sake, can this guy stay healthy? Not for nothing, but one of the words in player is play. You've got to play. You've got to stay healthy. You want to be great? You want to be a franchise quarterback? Whether it's in San Francisco or somewhere else, you've got to stay healthy. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if this marked the end of Jimmy Garoppolo's time as a starter in San Francisco. If Trey Lance can ball out in the next couple weeks, he may take the job and run with it. Now he's got a big test coming up in Arizona, and then the Niners have a bye week. But if Lance plays well against the Cardinals, Kyle Shanahan may say, you know what? I want to see what Lance can do. He's my guy. Let's see what Lance can do in the Shanahan system. I'm excited to see Trey Lance play. In limited time, he's looked solid. Not for nothing, but Trey Lance, through 3 games, already has 4 touchdowns to his name. He threw a touchdown pass in week 1 against the Lions. He ran for a touchdown in week 3 against the Packers. And he threw 2 touchdown passes against the Seahawks. Like, he's looked pretty darn good. You'd have been hard-pressed to find anyone who said that Trey Lance was a better prospect than Justin Fields. Maybe Lance had the higher potential, but Fields was viewed as more of a sure thing. I understand it's early. Totally get that. But through 4 games, Lance looks like the better player. I understand that the Bears won yesterday. They beat the Lions. But A, it was the Lions, and B, Fields only threw 17 passes. He didn't throw a touchdown. He threw an interception. He put the ball on the ground once. I really haven't been overly impressed with Fields. I don't understand the people criticizing Matt Nagy for not wanting to start him when Andy Dalton comes back. I understand you want to see the new toy play a little bit, but you can make a very strong argument that Dalton gives you a better chance of winning right now than Fields does. Like I said, I'll take Matt Nagy on the Jets. I take him in a second. Alright, now I'll give you some college football Valk talk. And I'll start with Georgia absolutely destroying Arkansas. Oh my Lanta, did I get this game wrong. I picked Georgia. Okay? You can go back. I picked the Bulldogs. But I thought this game would be a lot closer than it was. Arkansas just looked lost all throughout this game. It looked like a completely different team. A 37-0 blowout. I understand that Georgia has probably the best defense in the nation. And obviously, it was in Athens. But there's no excuse to only have 162 yards of offense. You know how many rushing yards Georgia had on Saturday? 273. If you added 100 to Arkansas's total offense, it would still be less than what Georgia did on the ground on Saturday. Stetson Bennett didn't need to do anything. He got the start over JT Daniels, which really surprised me because I thought Daniels would play. But, wow. I could have executed that game plan. I can hand the ball off. You just want me to give the ball to James Cook? Or Zamir White? Or Kenny McIntosh? Or Kendall Milton? I can do that. I can do that very easily. In fact, my grandmother would be able to do that. Not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before. Georgia absolutely wiped the floor with Vanderbilt. That game was over in the first quarter. It was a joke. Georgia made Arkansas look like that Vanderbilt team. Then again, I'll say this. You take a look at where Vanderbilt is this year compared to where they were last year. They've made significant progress. They're not a CFP threat or anything like that, but Vandy last year went 0-9. It got so bad that the only reason to turn on those games was to see a women's soccer player kick. Now, Vandy's 2-3. I mean, they should have had an easier time with UConn. They should have had an easier time with Colorado State. You would have liked for them to have beaten Stanford in Nashville. And you definitely would have liked for them to have beaten East Tennessee State. I don't care that they're 5-0. An SEC team should beat a SoCon team. But for Vandy to be 2-3, through the first 5 weeks. That's not bad. Again, they were winless last year. 2-3 for their first 5 games, not that bad. Clark Lee has a good program going. But back to Georgia, Arkansas. Georgia really looked like a man among boys. They're a force to be reckoned with. I still like Arkansas. I think they're a very good team. They deserve to fall to 13 in the AP poll, but they do have a chance to get back into the top 10. If they can knock off Ole Miss in Oxford, that would be impressive. And I don't think that's an impossibility either. Moving on now to Cincy Notre Dame. And the Fighting Irish are in trouble. Jack Cohn started the game but got benched because Notre Dame looked woefully inept on offense. They got shut out 17-0 in the first half. Then the second half starts and Drew Pine comes in. You're hoping that maybe he can give you a shot in the arm like he did the week prior against Wisconsin. It didn't work. Pine didn't look that good. Notre Dame's offense as a whole really didn't look that good. I mean, Michael Mayer looked good, and I like Mayer. Very fun player to watch. But the offensive line looked dreadful. Kyron Williams really didn't impress me. Braden Lenzy was solid, but Avery Davis couldn't get much going. Chris Tyree fumbled the ball away. The Fighting Irish are in trouble. Like, I really thought Notre Dame would be better this year. But they really had an unconvincing win over a bad FSU team. They give up 18 points in the fourth quarter. The Seminoles force overtime. Notre Dame's able to squeak by. They beat Toledo by a field goal. They beat Purdue pretty comfortably. That was a good win. But against Wisconsin, Notre Dame just dominated the fourth quarter. That was it. Through the first 3 quarters, they didn't look great. The defense did, but that was about it. I mean, Notre Dame has a good defense. They made Desmond Ridder work. They made Jerome Ford work. Granted, Ridder and Ford still got theirs because they're really good players, but the Bearcats only went 2 for 11 on third down. That's a good job by the Fighting Irish. Guys like Isaiah Foskey, Cam Hart, Drew White, and Howard Cross III really impressed me. But you know who impressed me more? Cincinnati. I was kind of low on Cincinnati entering Saturday's game. I didn't think they deserved to be the 7th ranked team in the nation. But now that they're 5, I really can't say that's wrong. They have looked much better than all of their opponents. Granted, Notre Dame was the first good team that they played, but still, they're really winning games easily. And not for nothing, but you take a look at their schedule for the rest of the season, the only teams that can give them trouble are SMU and maybe ECU, since that game is going to be in North Carolina. But let me ask you something. Would it surprise you if Cincinnati went undefeated? If Cincy goes undefeated, we've got a big conversation to have. Who deserves to be in the CFP? Would the committee leave out an AAC school? I mean, at least one of Alabama and Georgia won't go undefeated, because those two teams will go at it in the SEC title game. Iowa plays Penn State on Saturday, so one of those teams won't go undefeated. Oklahoma has some tough games coming up against Texas, Texas Tech, Baylor, and Oklahoma State. I don't think they're going undefeated. I don't think Michigan's going undefeated. They really haven't impressed me. They haven't beaten any great teams. The door is open for Cincinnati to make a run. They've just got to keep winning. I mean, this was a statement win to beat Notre Dame in South Bend. Job well done by the Bearcats. They're a force to be reckoned with. No question about that. Moving on now to Ole Miss, Alabama. We all knew that Alabama would win. We all knew they'd do so comfortably. We knew it would be a high-scoring game. Did we know that Brian Robinson would go off the way that he did? 36 carries for 171 yards and 4 touchdowns? No, but Robinson does have that ability to go off and have big games. He's a good running back. He's a very good running back, as a matter of fact. Alabama's dominance shouldn't surprise you. What should surprise you is how well Matt Corral played. Like, realize, he's going up against one of the best defenses in the nation in Tuscaloosa. I said this game would go a long way towards determining how I feel about him as an NFL prospect. You know what? He passed the test. He looked really good. Completed just under 75% of his passes for 213 yards. He was responsible for 2 touchdowns. The Crimson Tide did a good job of bottling him up so he couldn't run around and make stuff happen. They forced Corral to stay in the pocket and give the O-line of the Rebels credit. I thought they played well. Corral only got sacked twice. I thought Ben Brown and Orlando Umana looked really good. I mean, it's early to start talking about the NFL draft, but not for nothing, we're gonna go back to this game to evaluate Matt Corral. Because the Alabama defense is about as close to an NFL defense as you can get in college. Corral looked sharp. He made smart decisions. I mean, that game was over in the first half. Alabama was up 28-0. They were up 35-0 at one point. But Corral didn't let his team keel over and die. He did lead them down the field for some impressive drives. He looked much better in the second half than he did in the first half. But his smart decision making, combined with his leadership skills, made him look really good. I don't think I'm putting him ahead of Sam Howell yet. It's possible I get there. I've even heard some people say that Spencer Rattler, Oklahoma's quarterback, could be the top quarterback in this draft. We've got a ways to go, but I think right now my order would be Howell, Corral, Rattler. But that could change. I'll say this, if Corral keeps this up, because he's got some tough games coming up. He's got Arkansas on Saturday. He'll have Auburn soon. And the Egg Bowl is always tough. Corral could climb up my board. Moving on now to Baylor, Oklahoma State. Admittedly, a tough game to get into. I was very disappointed in Baylor's performance. I did not think they played well. They were excellent defensively. Spencer Sanders threw 3 interceptions. He threw under 200 yards. The Bears' defense gave their offense a chance to win. But it's been a long time since I've seen an offense look that inept. No one on the Bears' offense played well. Jerry Bohannon was absolutely useless. I wasn't impressed with Abram Smith. He had the one big run, the touchdown run, that really helped out his stats. But if you take that run out of the equation, he had 9 carries for 42 yards. I can't get excited about that. I can't get excited about Drew Estrada, since he really didn't come through when the Bears needed him to. How many times did Baylor have the ball in Oklahoma State territory only to see their offense stall out? In the first quarter, Sanders throws an interception. You've got 1st and 10 at the Cowboys' 36. You end up losing 8 yards on the drive. You have to punt. You can tie the game at that point. The 3rd Sanders interception, you get the ball at the Cowboys' 31. You go 5 yards the opposite direction. Again, the punter needs to come out. If you score touchdowns there, you win the game. I mean, even in the 4th quarter, when you make it a 1-score game, and then you get a stop on the ensuing drive, you think to yourself, okay, maybe Baylor can get something going here. They go 3 and out. The next Baylor drive, 3 and out again. You had the opportunity to seize upon the momentum that Oklahoma State gifted you. The Cowboys really didn't play well, except for Jaylen Warren, who had 36 carries for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. I understand that's only 3.5 yards per carry, but still, he was really the whole Oklahoma State offense. I'll give him credit. What a dreadful performance by Baylor. I was so disappointed in them. They deserve to be unranked. Oklahoma State didn't look much better, and I think they're going to lose to Texas, not this coming Saturday, the Saturday after. This is their bye week. But I was really ticked off watching Baylor. I don't know why, but that just bugged me. The biggest upset that happened on Saturday was Stanford knocking Oregon out of CFP contention. The Cardinals beat the Ducks 31-24. And I've got to give Tanner McKee a ton of credit. I was really impressed with him. Forget the stat line, which is impressive in and of itself. Completing 20 of 36 passes for 230 yards and 3 touchdowns. But executing the drive late in the game to tie it up and give your team a chance to win it in overtime. You get the ball at your own 13-yard line to start. It ends up being 2nd and 19 after a couple false starts. You find a hole in the Oregon defense that John Humphreys is able to exploit and gains 23 yards. Coming back from a targeting call. It was targeting. It was the right decision for McKee to come back from that and look as sharp as he did. That was impressive. And it was almost like every pass was right down the middle of the field. I understand that in a late game situation, maybe you're okay with giving up those passes in the middle of the field because the clock keeps running, but realize it's not the NFL. The clock doesn't keep running. It stops until the chain gang can reposition themselves after a first down. If there's not a first down, then the clock doesn't start until the snap. So the letting them complete passes over the middle of the field really doesn't work for me. And then you commit the holding in the end zone on what should have been the last play of the game. You know, I understand that was a ticky-tacky call. I wasn't in love with it in a situation like that. But it was close. Even then, though, no one's talking about it if you don't allow a touchdown on the untimed down. Just a bad job of situational awareness by Oregon. Overall, I really wasn't impressed with them. Their running game was okay, but that was about it. Their defense was really bad. You know what? Given how they played on Saturday, they don't deserve to be in the CFP. I'll close this show out with some Nhl Vault talk. I don't want to give you any MLB Vault talk. I want to save that for tomorrow. With the postseason starting at Fenway tomorrow, I just want to keep all the baseball stuff together. And I won't be going to the AL wildcard game. I wanted to go desperately. I just couldn't make it work. Like I said, I really wanted to go. I had it all worked out in my head how I wanted to do it. My plan was to leave tonight, get to Boston at like 11:30 at night, spend the day there, and then drive home right after the game. So I would have gotten home at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I would have done it. I would have been happy to do it. but there's a Yiddish word called beshert. The literal translation of that word is destiny. So some people will say it wasn't beshert. Basically, that means that it wasn't meant to be. Some people use the word beshert to mean soulmate. It has multiple meanings. The one that I primarily use it for is destiny. So again, if me going to the AL wildcard game wasn't beshert, it wasn't beshert. There's nothing I can do about that. Alright, now to the NHL Vault talk. The Vancouver Canucks locked up some big free agents. Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson are RFAs no more. Hughes signed a 6-year deal worth $47.1 million. That's $7.85 million per year. And Pettersson signed a 3-year deal worth $22,050,000. That's $7.35 million per year. I have no problem with either of these moves. These are great moves for the Canucks. These are necessary moves for the Canucks. Quinn Hughes is one of the best offensive defensemen in the NHL. His defensive game leaves a lot to be desired. There's no question about that. But last year he put up 41 points in 56 games. Granted, he was a minus 24, but still. 41 points in 56 games. That's really impressive. And he's young, too. He's going to turn 22 in 10 days. So now you've got Hughes locked up for a solid percentage of his prime. Not his entire prime. But you've got him locked up long term, and I promise you, he'll keep playing at an elite level. As for Pettersson, I was a little afraid that the Canucks would give him a long-term deal. From a pure overall ability perspective, Pettersson deserves a long-term deal. But realize he only played in 26 games last year. Giving him a 6-year deal would have been a little risky. I wouldn't have hated it, but I wouldn't have loved it. A bridge deal, a 3-year deal, I love. Here's the kicker. At the end of the deal, Pettersson will still be an RFA. So if you want, you can sign him to a long-term deal in 3 years. And it wouldn't surprise me if Pettersson got that long-term deal, because he's a very talented player. He's been basically a point-a-game player every year he's been in the NHL. Came out like a bat out of hell his rookie season. He won the Calder Trophy. The Canucks almost went back-to-back. Quinn Hughes was the runner-up in 1920, behind Cale Makar. The Canucks would have been the first team in NHL history to have back-to-back Calder Trophy winners since Bobby Orr and Derek Sanderson won the Calder Trophy in 66-67 and 67-68, respectively. The Canucks are set up really well for the future. They have a great core of players. Pettersson, Brock Besser, Bo Horvat, JT Miller, Connor Garland, Quinn Hughes, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Thatcher Demko. Travis Green is a really good coach. Jim Benning is a very smart hockey mind. The Canucks are set up really well for the future, and it wouldn't stun me if in a few years they made a lot of noise in the playoffs. Moving on now to another Canadian team. That is the Montreal Canadiens. The Habs signed Jake Evans to a 3-year extension worth $5.1 million. That's $1.7 million per year, and that's very fair for Evans. He's not a household name, there's no question about that. But he had a good year last year, 13 points in 47 games. Showed a physical side, good face-off taker. He's a good fourth liner, and he's young, he's 25. If that's what Evans tops out as, a fourth line center, I'm okay with that. I have no problem with that. Realize, this guy was a 7th round pick in 2014. It took him a while to find his footing in the NHL, but you know what? He got an opportunity last year, and he looked solid. Didn't get into a ton of playoff games, only got into 7, put up just 2 points, but he did the little things right. Threw the body around, he was a +3. Again, good face-off man. $1.7 million per year is more than fair for a fourth line center. Good job by the Canadiens. This move makes a ton of sense. I hope you enjoyed the New York Jets recap, which was posted this morning. You'll get a New York Yankees show tonight where I'll put a bow on the season. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.